Howdy folks, it is Monday, July 11th, 2011. I'm Skip Ruddertail, your Otter editor, and with me, as always, is...
Toons is the passenger side cat.
He's like a passenger side airbag.
Yeah, through all of life.
Yeah. This week we are discussing In the Moon Outside by cubetriangle.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite artists.
Yep, so, yeah, you picked this one out. Do you want to give us a little introduction as to how you came across it, or how he sent it to you, or what was the...
Well, I've been watching cubetriangle on FA for a while, and just commenting on things that he posted, and he's one of the artists that I really like because, I mean, yeah, some people I'm watching them on FA because, hey, cool, bears with big donors, that's great, cool, I know why I'm watching that. Other people, I'm watching them because they clearly have, like, a very keen artistic sense, and they're able to express this in a variety of mediums, and I'm just outright impressed by it. And cubetriangle is one of those people.
Yep.
And so out of nowhere, he sent me a story to consider for the podcast, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know he wrote. So
he's like a Renaissance type.
A Renaissance fur. A Ren fur. It's like, yo, did you go to the Ren fur? Okay.
Oh, that's awful. Let's ban that phrase from.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so I gave it a read and so, I mean, like, there aren't any tags I can read anything like that. So, I thought it was a fun experience in blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
Because me reading it and the first time and, being kind of oblivious as I am, not quite realizing it's a vor story going into it and getting really into the relationship the characters were having and the scene that it was being set in and the political undertones that were being developed and things like that. The one character ate the other character, and I was like, oh. oh. And it's cool because it's fun when every once in a while a piece can almost scandalize
Catches
you.
you by surprise.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm not into vor, and there's nothing really against it, but it shocks you when you get surprised by it like that, and it really fit the kind of the tone of the story also.
Yeah, it did. It did. And I guess we should say, a little bit, how this story came to feature this week. We were supposed to have a different story. There were some scheduling problems with the person recording it, so we've moved it back a little bit. And so at the last minute, I'm like, okay, we had this one in the queue. It wasn't recorded yet, so we went to our friend Sparf, who volunteered to do recording for us at some point, and I said, hey, buddy, can you whip this one out? In a couple days, and he said sure, and I think he did a great job. He's an actor and recording artist in training. He's working on his MFA, I believe, right now. And he was great. So I'm sure we'll be. I hope you enjoyed his reading. I think we'll be asking him to read for us again. He's also local, so we'll have to have lunch with him at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He had a wonderful voice.
I appreciate that. But I guess. One thing I wanted to briefly talk about and kind of get listener feedback on was the length of the story. Because last time, if you remember, we did a short story. We paired them together. You read one and I read one. So I think the total end result was like 25, 30 minutes for both. And this is only like 15. And so I guess I wanted to see what you thought about that, what listeners thought about that, and give your
I don't know,
rationale first.
I guess when you're reading a story, Skip, do you sometimes just wishing it had a little bit more heft to it? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, it would have been a great story if only we're just a little bit.
No. There's no problem. There's no problem with the story itself. It's more in terms of considerations for the podcast. Content-wise, there's a lot going on here, and we have plenty to talk about today.
Right.
This is more a consideration for the podcast and listeners like myself, perhaps, who listen to podcasts on their commutes or something like that.
Yes.
And do you have a certain expectation that, even though the length varies depending on the discussion and the length of the story that week, is there a minimum that you as a listener expect? It's like, you got to take up at least half an hour, and if you come at 15 minutes, that's not enough, and now I'm halfway through my commute, and
I'm just wondering if we should be encouraging people in this way during their daily commute.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I'm
taking the train.
We talked about that. Boners in the car, totally okay.
I don't know. I'm still not quite sold.
Before. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I wasn't supposed. I don't think I was.
So I guess content-wise, I think it's fine, and I guess it would just be a question to you listeners. Do you need a longer podcast? If we do short stories like this, which I loved. Do we, save it and pair it with, do a double header like we did once before, or is this okay? Because I think the story is great in and of itself, and there's certainly enough to talk about. It's just a consideration for, do you have a certain length expectation on the podcast itself as a listener?
Why don't you blast that out to our listeners in an email?
Okay.
Do you need a longer podcast?
Yeah.
They'll go straight to spam filters.
Right, there you go. It's like, order today. Okay. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It was a good, I'm glad Cube Triangle sent it in you, and I'm glad you said, let's do this one.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad we went to the zoo, because I had fun.
Yeah.
Even though the red pandas were
Yeah, we did. We went, I don't know, if some of you seen,
I posted the picture.
Posted a couple photos. Yeah, I've got to put up mine. But yeah, we went to the zoo last week and had a good time with what does he go by?
Taylor on FA.
Your boyfriend.
I
didn't want to give away his real name. Oh God. So yeah,
Reginald
we had a good
Beauregard
time.
Thurston III.
There you go. So yeah, we had a good time, though some people slept in a little bit, and it was already nap time for several of the animals, including the otters.
But at least the otters were there. My red pandas were gone. They were
Yes.
shut down. I don't even know if they're alive.
I think
What if
they're
they
alive,
died?
dude. I think they're alive. Usually that makes the paper if an animal at the zoo dies, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
What if the panda's just really depressed and can't come out?
Well, it could be an emo panda.
I should
That's
send
true.
it a card.
You could. Like, oh God, then I have to reply to it, the pressure. Yeah, so I said, oh yeah, but we'll go in the morning. I'll pick you guys up and we'll head to the zoo. I'll be there, around 9 or so.
Mm-hmm.
I was running late because of bad traffic that morning, so I was like, oh God. I get there at 9:30, and I wake them up.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it took us a while to get to the zoo, and like some of the animals, they were already in, it was getting to midday, and they were already in, otter nap time. But that's okay. We'll move on. Anyways, yeah, the story. Stop feeling guilty. It's okay. You can make it up to me later. We'll go again. No, not careful, people. We'll go again. We'll make sure you're up.
All right.
No. So yeah, this was a horror story, and I guess it's our second. I think we could.
It's depending on your standards. It's like maybe our second story that's like meant to disconcert you in a way. Mm-hmm. If you want to think of it in horror in that kind of sense, it's not.
Our first would be Al Flora's, story with the, traveling through space. Yes. Of course, I think you could write that as a horror story, but that's a little non-traditional horror-wise, I guess, because it's not like a monster or, a crazy scientist.
Werewolves
or
are
like
more traditional.
Or this is more traditional, I think, because it's a monster. I guess I read an interesting analysis of horror movies earlier this week, and saying that in talking about the kind of career of the old monster movie guys like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and saying that in the 20s and 30s and 40s, horror movies, and even in the 50s, involved monsters. Like they were Frankenstein or Dracula, or in the 50s maybe they were aliens, but they were monsters,
right.
And then with the kind of realistic cinema that you see emerging in the 70s, where things got grittier and realistic, things like all these great 70s films, you get into a different kind of horror movie, which you switch to things like serial killers and things like that. So we're no longer doing monsters in most cases. We're doing the
real life
serial
things
killers
that
kind of things.
You.
But this is a combination, isn't it? Which I think is kind of interesting, because there is a monster movie, but the setting is a very realistic one in a lot of ways.
Yeah, kind of like this seedy
Very
downtown
common
bar.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's two lovers. It's somebody that you trust betraying you, which is much more this kind of newer horror.
Yeah,
I think viewpoint too.
I didn't read it so much as a horror story outright, though. I read it as kind of a dark personal tale about being on the outside of things. This is, of course, being like my first kind of blissful ignorance reading, where I'm always kind of oblivious to what's actually going on the deeper tones. But I still like that even on the further readings, just because of how thoroughly it goes into describing how different he is from those who are gathering there, and how much he doesn't belong in that space. To even have explicitly the other characters state to him, "You don't belong here. You should be leaving." And it's the most plainful, obvious thing in the world that he doesn't belong there. He should be leaving. They're going to kill him.
Yeah.
So it doesn't read to me so much as horror, maybe because the intense imagery of it softens that effect, and it's not quite so realistic when you're having cutscenes where corpses of a king president are being paraded through the street. It kind of gives it a bit more of a comical
I was
slant
happy
to it.
you told me, because I was like, oh, it has to be Reagan, and you confirmed in an email from Cube Triangle that it's Reagan, right?
Authorial fallacy. It doesn't have to be Ronald Reagan just because he said it was.
Alright, that's true. That's true.
Sure, whatever. It's Ronald Reagan. Let's bet
It's
it be
Ronald,
Ronald Reagan.
yeah.
It's not
Reagan
Bush because they didn't like Bush
smash.
enough, right?
Yeah, no, of course not.
There's no cult of personality around Bush. Just
Right.
this really smirky, miss me yet kind of billboard you see going up in rural Texas. I think those are the best.
Can you imagine, like, the cult of personality around Dick Cheney? I'm just gonna think about that a minute.
The cult of personality sounds like a series of like morgue Rockettes.
That's
Just all in black.
There you go. So yeah, you're right. It's I don't know, I think that was an interesting setting. It's this weird sort of, I don't know whether it's the present or some kind of weird future with this kind of horror. Kind of reminded me of comics or movies, this kind of weird future dystopia sort of thing, where we've got, a dead, president, who's hailed as kind of a god emperor or something, but he's dead. And we've got werewolves, and there were references to purges of various people. So there's a little bit of this kind of future dystopia idea going on, which is kind of fun. And that, I think, partially works into the horror theme. This is our first werewolf story, of course. This is our first transformation story. And it's our first vor story.
Should I get out the streamers? Should I put up a sign?
Yeah, it's
when do the balloons drop?
Though. Yeah,
this is incredible.
These are three themes in furry that are very popular with a lot of folks.
Yeah,
that we
it's true.
have yet to explore in any depth, and I'm sure because they're so popular, I'm sure we'll be revisiting them in the future.
Oh, no.
I know.
Hopefully with good stories.
But it's interesting, like how werewolf as a genre is obviously for a lot of folks who, maybe that's the closest they get to knowing what a furry is werewolf stories. Well, so people who aren't in the furry community, and there are separate werewolf communities, because I know Fuzzwolf has talked about, he was a werewolf, whatever, I don't know what they call themselves, but a lichen community or whatever, before he was a furry. And he said, yeah, there are a lot of weirdos, and he liked the people in furry better. So, I mean, there's even a separate community, and I think there's some overlap in the Venn diagram there.
Right. I feel about werewolves the same way I feel about dragons, where it's one of those things that the people who are very much into them are just fucking nerdy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you see a guy and he's going to a musical downtown and he's wearing a very tight pink shirt with all his friends and he is obviously having a very good time. You go, wow, that's really fucking gay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sometimes you're online and you see a guy and you click on his profile and all of his, profile image pictures are werewolves and dragons. You go, wow, that's really fucking nerdy.
Or you go to somebody's house and they have like in their living room, they have all the little dragon figurines you see like in the Sky Mall's catalog, like
Right.
with the dragon with the crystal sphere, or the dragon candle holder, and they have like all of them, and you're
They're such
like
mystical beasts.
and you're like, wow,
because they're mystical beasts, and they're just so stately.
that's a lot of dragon.
I know, but that's fucking nerdy. But that's what the
So werewolves are a little like that.
yeah, it's kind of like that. But it's funny because how do you tame that? How do you overcome this?
Dun-dun-bum.
No.
You can't tame werewolves, man. They're werewolves. Damn.
But, okay, it makes. I'm being serious. Like, fantasy and sci-fi taints things in an awful way. This is my actual. It really does. It really does. So then, how do you wash the sci-fi fantasy taint off of things like werewolves when you want to use them in a
I'm
story?
always disappointed when movies have werewolves that the werewolves aren't sexier. Like, I'm
Really?
very disappointed.
That surprises you.
In that generally movie werewolves are like grosser, or they're going on the gross or horrifying or scary side, and I'm like, make them sexy werewolves. That's what I want in my werewolf movies. Like, they should look like wolf people. They shouldn't look like weird, like half furless,
They should look like furries, is what you're
slabbering
saying,
things. Yeah.
They should look like
It could
furries.
be
And they should
bloody.
go out
Look,
of town.
honestly, if the guy has, if he has the bite strength of a wolf, he could be plenty fucking scary without like looking like he has mange or something. That's all I'm saying. Yeah,
That's fair enough, but
that's fair enough. And then transformation's a big fetish for a lot of people.
yeah, and it's catching on. I think it's starting to be like it's gonna be. It's all that hypnosis. I think is the other one that everyone's doing. I don't. It's like
Yeah.
I
We haven't
seen
done
it
a
before.
hypnosis story.
No.
Bun, my partner, he feels hypnosis stories are a big turn off.
Really?
Yeah, he's not into them.
Because it's like mind control, and people feel that's
He
private.
doesn't like that. Yeah, I think so. So, but yeah, transformation, and this doesn't cover, go into a lot. It doesn't. I think it has transformation in it, and it has vor in it, but not in a way that either is fetishized. If that makes sense.
It's
in
tucked
other
in at
words,
the
we
very
don't
end.
see a rich description of either the transformation or the vor.
It's pornographic. That's for a fact.
Yes.
I mean, you can be real there. It's actually explicitly sexual, but it seems like it's done
more
in a more of a
explicitly
way.
sexual than it is explicitly transformative or vor, I think.
Yeah,
If
but
that makes sense.
it's not. It doesn't seem like anyone's supposed to be enjoying this in a particular way. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, the
I
sex
think that's
isn't
why I liked
particularly
it then.
explicit either, yeah.
no,
So they kind of touch on these things, but they're not fetish stories that focus on these particular interests. So I'm sure we will run into stories that do focus on some of these particular interests and send them in if you write these things.
when I was reading it the second time, I was trying to figure out, okay, how is it that I kind of missed this undertone of what was going to happening, and I was surprised
The
to see.
foreshadowing.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how early on the foreshadowing was coming and how explicit it was, and how I should have been able to recognize it. And I was trying most particularly to figure out at what point does it become like a vor story? At what point should it become something explicit and you can't really ignore if you want to? And it really does kind of remain like that up until the end of the story, I think. That's how it has this punch to catch you off guard like that.
Well, I think that was something that occurred to me because early on in the story, when they're still in the bar. By the way, I grew up in Chicago, so I love the Chicago setting. I appreciated that. But when they're still in the bar, clearly she looks around and, he says he's not going to leave without her. And she kind of looks around and realizes or, is aware that if he stays, he's going to be eaten.
Right.
And yet she still takes him out, so he isn't eaten there by everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she goes to his house and ends up eating him anyway. And so that kind of intrigued me, the fact that she's removing him from being eaten only to do it anyway. And so why is my question. And then with that, I think is when did she decide? When she took him out of the bar, had she decided to eat him already? Or was it something that was decided later on in the heat of the moment?
I interpret it as kind of an act of pity.
Uh-huh.
And I feel as if you could tell early on what his intentions are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He is clearly suicidal, to put it in the bluntest terms.
I don't know if he's suicidal.
Yeah, because it's clearly what he's doing.
He doesn't want to die. He wants to be one.
He doesn't. Is that what happens? Did you get bitten?
He says he wants to be.
No,
they
would have ripped him apart, and they would have.
Well, yeah, that's what she knew. But his understanding was he wants to be like. See, is this a ooh?
No, see, I didn't know.
Is this a metaphor for all furries? You know, is this us? Is the guy us? You know, it's like, oh, we want to be like you so much. I don't want to be this thing.
But I didn't interpret that as him believing that this was going to turn him into a werewolf. Just the fact that he didn't have the capability of being a werewolf. He couldn't be a werewolf, so I may as well kill myself via the werewolves.
See, I don't know. I think that describes. I don't know. I don't think he's that aware, and that may have been her understanding of it, or her
very well
decision
may have been,
of
but
it. But I don't know if that's his.
It's kind of. I still think it's an act of pity though, because I don't think he understood even then just what he was in for.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah.
Even if he did have these horrible thoughts, and maybe it was just her way of making it as tender and maybe as painless as she could do for him.
Yeah, and, I mean, because there definitely wasn't. I mean, it was like one sentence, and I gobbled him up. Mm-hmm. So,
and also maybe she just hated him. There's also that possibility too.
Well, there is that. I think there is this. She is angry at herself that even after choosing not to be with this guy anymore, she's following him home to his apartment.
Oh, she absolutely...
And she is really upset about the fact that he is able to, manipulate her into leaving the bar and get her to go to his apartment. Just doing everything he wants her to do up until the point she eats him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really significant, because up until that point, she's been doing everything he wants her to do, and then it changes dramatically, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I got the impression she felt insecure as well, because when they were in the bar, the thing I picked up on was that she was fumbling with her Spanish just as much as he was. Mm-hmm. So I get the impression just a little bit insecure about her own place in that kind of environment, and knowing that him being with her was only, reinforcing that alienation.
Well, and maybe realizing, how much does this guy want to be with me just because I'm a werewolf?
Just because I'm a werewolf.
Yeah. I think she doesn't want it. This is what you wanted, isn't it? All along. So, and angry about that, that's what he wants her for.
And she'd only been to, I think it said 3 of the meetings and so far, or something like that. And I guess she would maybe insecure about her place there. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, you can.
And we don't know how you become a werewolf in this story.
No,
we aren't sure of that. Whether it's genetic or whether you can get bitten and survive, and we don't know.
Yeah, well, what I read it as was just a pathetic story about a pathetic dude. I kind of think that's what it's supposed to be read as. It's supposed to be that. It's supposed to be that kind of painful process about a person who can't get what he wants and then is killed in a kind of humiliating and degrading way.
But then is it? In the sense that it's about her, is it a empowering story about her, or is she just as pathetic?
Well, in terms of empowerment, I thought what it maybe reinforced was a positive concept of separatism, and it might reinforce a desire to keep different worlds separate, because she is ultimately performing, I think, this policing act of keeping him out of this space. Mm-hmm.
Well, there is that sense that this guy is a white heterosexual male, right? And what do? We co-opt other cultures, as our own. So,
death porn.
Yeah,
why not?
Yeah, but I mean, saying, oh well, this is I can do everything else I want, and I can be a werewolf too, and maybe her saying, no, you can't.
You can very easily find a positive interpretation in there, I think.
Anyway, I enjoyed it. It was nice to have a little different story here. I like it when we're mixing things up a lot, and I've been enjoying that.
Also, in tone, it's much more artistic. I think
it is.
To use the easiest term that'll probably make at least a few people out there cringe compared to last week's story, which I remember I also really enjoyed how it was written, but completely different style in terms of the structure of the story and the tone, and like it was a very well paced, well plotted out story. Well, this one. And The Moon Outside, built to like a very kind of fabulous crescendo very quickly.
Right.
And it's structured very much like a pulpy story in that way, even though I said that I don't read it as kind of a pulpy story because it isn't, lurid enough in that sense. Right. The pacing goes along much more like that. And I don't know, I guess just made it much easier for me to process.
Yeah. No, I see that. No, I enjoyed it. Well, thank you, Cube Triangle, and do check them out on FA at Cube Triangle, all one word.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So I don't know. Do we have anything else you want to add for this week, or are we good?
I think we're golden.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I don't really have anything much to say. I'm going to try to start using the Bad Dog Book Club FA some more.
Yes, we're going to post some other pictures and things there periodically, and ask questions of you, our readers. So we can actually, there you go. You can post the question about podcast and story length.
Yep.
This week
we're going to start
on
pestering
FA.
you.
So
in journals.
Terrible journal entries, which I get build up, and periodically nuke.
Can't wait. Yeah, can't wait.
So, we hope you enjoyed it, and hope you stay cool. I think most of the country's in a heat wave, so stay cool. And we'll see you next week with a new story.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Ciao.
Ciao.